And we're off. Okay, today we are going to be doing Do Not Steal. And we called this priceless possessions, which might not be completely evident what we mean by that right away, but hopefully by the end this will become very meaningful. Okay, do not steal. Introduction. Victims of theft. Do not steal is a universal value essential for society to function. The Torah points out that the ultimate reason why God brought about the flood during the time of Noah was theft. What exactly is theft? How far-reaching is it, and what principles underlie it? What about the victims of theft? Perhaps we can learn something about this core value by focusing on the victims of theft. Let's look at the text. This is an excerpt from an article. It was in the LA Times. Crimes are classified under different categories for various purposes. Crime against property is a legal phrase used to describe a crime, the object of which is property, as contrasted with person. Burglary is one such offense. A close examination of recent statistics and psychological studies reveals, however, that the classification of burglary, at least residential burglary, as a property offense is a misnomer. Invasion of privacy and the disruption of the sanctity of the home can have a serious psychological effect that leaves permanent emotional scars. The initial response on the discovery of the burglary is a sense of being violated. Thoughts and activities are preoccupied by the violation of personal space and the loss of personal property. Recent research findings indicate that the emotional effect of the crime is more detrimental to victims than the financial loss that they may have suffered. Question: has anything ever been stolen from you? How did it make you feel?
My sister went out for an afternoon trip to a museum, and when she came back, her entire house was stolen, including her clothing, her car, almost all their jewelry, so much. Any kind of keepsakes they had, it was unbelievable. In 3 hours, they must have pulled up a moving truck and stole most of her. And she lives in a fairly rural area, so kind of in a rural area. It was an unbelievable theft. They never figured out who took it or never got anything back. It took her a year to put her life together. And they literally took the pictures on the walls, everything.
It's major.
It was horrible.
So many years ago when I lived in an apartment, somebody broke in, and they didn't really steal very much. They stole like a couple of pieces of jewelry. I had a cup full of quarters that I was using for laundry. It wasn't a lot, but the feeling was just like you said, of being violated, that somebody was in my house, that they strewed, I guess they threw the cup. They were, I don't know what they're expecting to find, but someone came in there. But the fact that I don't know how they got in, because it didn't look like there was an evident, really, they didn't do damage to the door or anything. So, but yeah, that feeling was not pleasant. It was a very scary feeling. And even though it wasn't a lot taken, it was that somebody got in there. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Made you feel very vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Not a good feeling.
Yeah, I'd say that's a violation is the big word I hear, and I felt the same way. We've been robbed several times, and one time my wife's wedding jewelry was taken, and you know, in other words, was related actually to a situation where we kind of knew or discovered the genesis of the crime, whatever. But just the violation and just, you know, that the compromising safety.
Yeah.
It made me, when that happened to me, it made me reluctant to go back to my house on my own, alone. So, and the only stuff that was taken was some costume jewelry and a pair of dancing shoes of my husband's, but it happens to be costume jewelry from my grandmother, which was, of course, irreplaceable.
Right.
It's really quite shocking, just by the way, that we've all I don't know if Jill didn't say anything, but I don't know, has anything ever been stolen from you?
Yes. When we were first married, my husband and I lived in an apartment, and I went out one day and my car was gone. And it took 15 minutes for me to think, is it really gone? I mean, I know I drove it home. You know, I was so disconcerted. Yes.
Well, that's shocking. You know, over here we've had a few burglaries, and also the question. First of all, it's really sad that we've all been victims of theft, of burglary. But the feeling of personal violation, I think, is something really interesting to try to work out. What does this tell us about our relationship to our possessions? And that's the second question over here.
Mm. Oh.
I guess some of our possessions, I won't say it about all of our possessions, are reflections of ourselves, particularly the stuff that we purchased, and have more value than the actual dollar and cents value of whatever was taken.
Interesting.
I think when you've experienced very significant loss, it causes a great change. When I was in my early 20s, my parents' house burned down, and I was in that like few months between graduation and getting my own apartment. So I was living there. I lost everything. And at that point, that's it. You don't have much of a relationship with possessions anymore, and I still don't. It's like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
No one was hurt, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have friends there was a big forest fire in Israel. I think I mentioned this last week or 2 weeks ago, but also the entire house burnt down with everything in it. And even some very significant things. They had pictures. His father had died when he was young, and kind of his father's possessions and the pictures of his father were all in that house. And they really had to, and I think are still in the process of kind of working through a new relationship with property, with things. Difficult. Okay, let's go on. Introduction. The shut, the literal understanding. Stealing by definition means taking something without having permission or right that someone else owns or has the right to use. This can be broken up into three categories: theft of property, money and valuables, theft of goodwill, da'at, and kidnapping. So the first text is actually the bear, lo tignov, very simple, do not steal. And the Saforno says over there, do not steal includes kidnapping, theft of money and valuables, and theft of da'at, knowledge. We're going to, for now, translate da'at as knowledge. The main intent is kidnapping, which is a capital offense similar to murder and adultery. See, there's another verse in the Torah that says, do not, lo tignavu, do not steal. So why do we need two verses for stealing? So one is for property and one is for kidnapping. So I think the Midrash says that the one in the Ten Commandments, because of context, is talking about kidnapping, because that's a capital crime as opposed to the stealing, theft of property. So we're going to go through each one. Kinds of property theft. Property theft is theft of anything which has a financial value. It not only includes objects of values, cars, phones, jewelry, etc., but also theft of intellectual property, public property, and even borrowing without permission. So physical property, objects, is simple. What is intellectual property? Theft of intellectual property includes creations of the human mind. When purchasing copyrighted, printed, or digital material, one does not buy the mental creation itself, only the right to use it. And there's a comment here by Rabbi Shimon Shkop. It's on Baba Kama, is a tractate of the Talmud. It is obvious, according to Torah and convention, that one who creates something new in the world is the owner and possesses every right over it, and therefore can determine what they're selling. I'm selling you really a subscription to use it. You're allowed, when you buy something which has intellectual value, you have no right to use it in any way you want. It actually comes with a specification. Okay, public property. Public property can be stolen. It is owned by the public according to the way the public decides it should be used. An example of this is parking in a disabled parking place. One can never really repay this theft because one does not know the extent of the damages or whom was damaged by the theft. The Talmud suggests giving the value of the theft to a cause from which the public will benefit. And this is a Tosefta in Baba Kama. Stealing from the public is worse than stealing from an individual. Someone who steals from an individual is able to apologize and return what he stole. Not so someone who steals from the public. And the Talmud says, and as for the money belonging to those that they do not recognize, meaning the public, they should use that money for community needs.
Is that why people get sentenced to community service?
That's interesting. I'm not sure that's always in crimes committed against the community, but they definitely would make, the logic would follow. Okay, this is fascinating. Borrowing without asking. The Talmud teaches us that borrowing something without asking is also considered theft. However, as with taking something without intent to return, if one is sure that the owner of what is taken or borrowed would have given permission, one does not need to ask. Still, if possible, to get express permission, one should do so. And the source in the Talmud, Rabbah says, someone who borrows without permission is a thief. So that's it. Obviously that's based on the understanding that it's not just the object, but it's the use of the object that the owner possesses. And taking away that use is a type of theft. Okay, conversation. How has technology today changed our sense of personal property? We perceive our online shopping history as a personal possession.
Are you talking about the fact that there's a footprint from wherever we go, and then people are stealing? I mean, I would
using,
that intellectual. They stole all of my, information and passwords. I mean, they did, like, the whole country. Half the people in the country got stolen with that break-in of that hacking from Equifax.
Right.
There too. So that's kind of intellectual property. I feel that's definitely stealing. You don't feel it necessarily unless someone, scams you with it. But I know even when the technology started to change, many years ago, when people were now downloading music, it was a big deal. They had one of these, I think it was Napster or something, and everyone was freaking out because a lot of the kids wanted I'm just downloading music. But the artists were very upset, and it's definitely has changed. But there's a lot of, I guess technically all the companies that we visit on the web, they have that little thing you have to press to say agree.
I accept everything. Right.
Yes.
I mean, it was a joke. I think, John Stewart once said, those little things that no one really reads. I mean, there could be Mein Kampf in there, and we would check okay. We're not reading it, but still, it can feel overwhelming that your information is out there. And I was just reading an editorial in the New York Times this morning about how somebody hacked into some either Sony or somebody's all the accounts or hacked individual actors and actresses stuff, and they're throwing out all of their personal photos. It's also horrible, and you can't get it back. Once it's out there, so that's
it's interesting.
a problem. It's a big problem.
Probably all of us have been possible victims, or people have attempted to perform some sort of theft using technology.
Yes.
I'm sure we've all been, what's the word I'm looking for? Not potential, but we've been attacked in some way. I think what you say, in terms of someone hacking and taking a password, that I think is absolute, that we understand, wait, that's my password, that belongs to me. There's another question involved here, and that is, the fact that Google knows what articles you're reading, and then will use that information to now start advertising to you because they know what actually you like.
I was going to say Facebook taking your information and making money off of it by giving it, to companies or whatever.
Right. Now, we've all agreed to that, right? As you pointed out, it's the little thing that we didn't read.
Yeah, you're agreeing to it. So technically, it's okay. But
Right.
You've been on Facebook. I've been impersonated. A lot of people, so that's stealing. They're stealing your identity and pretending they're you. Right. It got shut down, but they do it all the time.
Right. I think there's a point to, maybe it's an age thing. That, to me, I think we were all caught unawares. Like, we didn't think of that as being worth anything. Like, the articles I've read, it's my history. Is that worth anything? I didn't grow up thinking that was worth anything. So
Here's something that happened yesterday. I was in the car with somebody, and we're driving on the highway, and he's chatting with me, and then something goes on his dashboard that says the driver seems to be distracted. Pull over and rest. So this car was reading something about his emotional state. Like either he was reading like how he was gripping reading how he was gripping the steering wheel, or eye contact with the road. It was something that this car was monitoring.
No, so I just got a new car that has something like that in there. I don't think it goes by how long you've been driving, and it does see if you're shifting or whatever, and it'll alert you to stop. It might even just be a timer. So it's not. I don't think
he was just driving like 20 minutes. It wasn't like a long time at all.
But I think your point, Audrey, is that so much of what we do is now being monitored and used.
And more and more. I mean, I have a brother-in-law who's working on all these sensors of so that you can monitor your emotional state, like agitation, and he does a lot of meditation work, and he's doing all these apps so that you can monitor your emotional state. But not only can you monitor, but everyone else can monitor too. So if you work for a company and they determine by your eye movements or whatever that you might be distracted or agitated, they can tell you, oh, you seem to be distracted or agitated from 2 to 4 o'clock yesterday, and you were interfacing with clients, and that's not acceptable in our company. So you need to get your agitation level down, or, I mean, the amount of lack of privacy and stealing our I mean, even our emotional states. I mean, I don't know. It's scary, scary stuff.
And on the flip side, recently, I think Netflix came out and said, you know, hey guys, stop having so many people sharing passwords and not paying for the service and getting it out there for free.
So a question becomes, are we living in a society, or are we living in an age that there is no such thing as private ownership, when you don't even own the sphere around you, and there is no such thing as privacy, and you are never alone? Is there such a thing as private ownership?
Good point.
I would like to think that they just caught us. We weren't aware that these things could be monetized, and therefore we've given them away. But the world will change where people are, you know, the average guy is starting to wake up and say, hang on, that's mine. I generated it. I created it. That's worth money to me.
Might be
And
too late.
we're not just going to give it away. I can't see it going away.
It might be too late.
It might be too late. You're right. Okay.
Read Yuval Harari's Homo Deus.
Yeah, he's extremely bad. I thought he went off the cliff.
But,
Okay.
Well, it makes me wonder, should I even get a smartwatch, which I wanted to do, because it's watching me and people will know where I am. And if you deny a program the right to determine your location, they say, okay, you can't use this program.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now they're saying that Alexa and those kind of devices can be hacked, and people can rob you that way as well. Crazy.
Anyone read Zoom's small print about what, you know,
No.
who knows? Maybe someone's watching. Okay. Studies show that we are less likely to take good care of things in the public domain. How has the shared economy, zip cars, city bikes, Airbnb, changed our relationship to the things we use?
It's really fascinating and makes some sense. You know, why should my car be sitting in my driveway for days on end if I'm not using it? Like, in terms of cost, it's kind of silly, right?
Yeah, it should be a time.
I think this generation maybe has a different relationship to like, they're not buying big houses, you know, I think it actually has some merit.
Right, they don't need to own things.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, you know, when I stay in Airbnbs, I actually think I take less advantage of them than staying in a hotel, because it's got a personal touch, whereas a hotel is commercial.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, it's me up against the commercial, you know, whoever it is. But in the personal space, I appreciate, I can relate to, if someone was staying in my house, how I would like it to be treated.
I do have to say, we have a house that we rent for the summer, and we've been doing this for like 30 years. And I do see a difference in the way people treat our property. Like, it's becoming, we have more damage now than we used to have. Because I don't know. Well, I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know.
Okay, let's go on, otherwise we're running out of time. The laws of theft do not take into account sentimental value. Is this fair? How could this value be evaluated? Yeah. Anyone has an idea? Ever heard of any society or law that deals with this?
Only the redress people seek for mental distress. What do they call that? They call it something. So perhaps it's not criminal, it becomes a civil case. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. The distress caused through theft.
Mm-hmm. Or any crime.
I don't think the insurance companies are moved by sentimental value too often. They're just like, this is your policy.
Right.
That's it.
I'm not sure in the halakha either. You know, it's very different when you damage someone's property, when you damage their body. When someone when you damage someone's body, it is taken into account what's called boshet, embarrassment. You know, and that you could start to understand there's and pain and things like that. But in terms of property, I don't think there's any value in halakha for sentimental value. Okay, so that, yes.
When you insure something, and let's say it's like your engagement ring or something, do you only have to insure it for what it's appraised at, or can you insure it for more because it has sentimental value to you?
I'm sure you could choose to, but you're going to pay more.
But I don't know if you can. If you have an appraised value of something, can you insure it? I guess you could.
I think they only insure the appraised value.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Is the lack of any adjustment for sentimental value in the Torah a way of the Torah saying you shall not become attached? There shouldn't be a sentimental attachment to things.
Possibly. Or it's just an impossible thing to evaluate. So therefore, you know, or maybe it doesn't take away from the crime, but it's not included in the payment. Maybe you could argue that. Maybe that's a good thing to research. Okay, dat or goodwill. So we originally translated it as knowledge. That's the literal translation. Theft of dat, goodwill, is interesting. The classic case is going into a store and pretending to be interested in buying something when you are not. It is clearly deceiving. But what are you stealing? Why is this under theft? Actually, you are stealing unearned goodwill, meaning attention, gratitude, or appreciation. Deception through which you receive unearned goodwill is theft. For example, if you bought 2 tickets to a concert, one for you and one for your best friend as a birthday present. Turns out that your best friend can't come to the concert, but you have another friend who is also having a birthday soon and decided to give her the ticket. In this case, it is deceiving to tell her that you bought it especially for her if you would not have actually done so. If you do, it would be stealing unearned appreciation from that friend.
Aye.
Source, text. Shulchan Aruch, one should not steal another's positive impressions by pretending that you would do something for them, knowing that you will not do it. For example, you may not invite someone for a meal knowing that they will not accept. One should not open already open barrels to give the impression that you're opening a new barrel for him. However, if the person fools themselves and thinks it is being done for them, for example, you meet a friend on the way and he thinks he came out to greet him, you do not have to tell him. So it's where, I guess it's obvious. Conversation. Do you think that browsing in a store to see an item, but then buying it online is stealing?
I don't think so, because you can't see the item online and you need to know about the item before you purchase it. And reading a description on a website is not the same.
But the store, the argument against that,
the store might think differently.
And the salesperson too, whose time you used up.
Right. So.
Yeah, because especially if you're definitely like, you can, what happens is you go to the store, you see something, and then you go Google it for cheaper, and you have no intention of buying it in the store. You really shouldn't do it. I know people do it. We all do it. We want to see something, for real. And also, I know people don't seem like it, but if you really are going into the store with no intention of buying, so I said it's a hard thing to think of. Like, a lot of people like to just, go around and, window shop, which I don't see a problem with that, but you're not telling anybody, you're not asking a salesperson to help you and put on all the different clothing, and then you never really had any intention of buying something. It's a waste of the shopkeeper's time. They think that you're going to make a sale, and there's no way you're going to make a sale. So it, when you're on that end of, I had a situation where my husband at one time was dealing with somebody, and people were really just picking his brain. They wanted him to give him a quote on something, and then he actually used his quote to send to somebody else with never having any intention of using, my husband's business, which is kind of like that I looked at it, I said, that's theft,
Yeah. And that's this theft, right? There's nothing,
Yeah.
It might have been a piece of paper, but
Right, but it had all the prices and whatever that was going to do and what he was going to do, and you just give that's the same thing. Same thing happens in business. When I was in advertising, you would come up with someone would ask you to pitch a product or pitch an account, and the team would come out and come up with a whole creative idea, and then they were never intending to use your company, and then they take that information to their own advertising agency and say, we like this idea. Now you're not supposed to do it, but people do it all the time. And
what happens if, let's say you go to a store, and if you can't find it any cheaper online, you would buy it in the store, but you're going to check. Is that okay?
Probably, because there's a potential of you buying it. I think that if there was a potential that you would buy something in the store, look, we all go shopping.
Mhm.
I'm going to go to 4 different stores because I didn't buy it at your store. Doesn't mean that I'm stealing from you.
They understand that you're going to check out what you can.
Right. Let's say I went car shopping. I'm going to look at 5 different cars. I'm not going to buy 5 different cars. So it's not like I went into your store, I checked it out and didn't, I could have bought a car. There's always that the salesperson has to, but if you really know that you are not buying something, I am really not buying something, that's when I think it's theft.
I think we should at least admit, and it's always, can I help you? I'm looking right now. I'm exploring right now. I don't think there's any harm in that. So someone knows, no promises. We'll see what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The problem is often it's not really the decision of the salesperson. It would be a major. Their time is really being paid for by someone else. That maybe they can't make that decision. But I agree with you. I think that's at least the ehrlich thing to do. Okay, is re-gifting breaking the commandment of do not steal? Can't be, because we all do it. So I think it goes back to this. If the person's going to think that you went out of your way and give you more appreciation than you deserve, then it is. Right? You're getting something that you don't deserve. If it's understood that, hey, you come for Friday night dinner and you bring me salt, a new salt and pepper, I understand that there's a good chance that last Friday night you got it.
But didn't we just read last week about white lies for the sake of making peace?
Well, what if it's something that like you just wouldn't use, and then if you didn't give it to someone who might more appreciate it than you, it's just gonna, you didn't ask for the gift, No,
the problem is that the recipient thinks that you went out of your way to buy a gift for them.
Right.
You did go out of your way to select the person who might appreciate something that you didn't.
Right. So I wouldn't, I haven't done it I'll do it for things like a charity thing, because I usually, and then I didn't. I gave it to a bazaar or whatever. I didn't want to make sure that the person saw me giving it away.
My wife and I, one of our wedding gifts, we got Shabbat candles sticks that had wax on it.
That had what?
It was the best. Best gift.
Had a what?
They had inaugurated them.
They were vintage. She probably someone paid a fortune for the vintage.
My grandmother had a do-fall cupboard. What's a do-fall cupboard? So it was full of all these gifts that she didn't want, and she'd open it up and say, this will do for that person, and this will do for that.
That's my sister's gift closet at her house. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. What are some ways in which we steal goodwill, either intentionally or unintentionally? And so remember, once again, stealing of goodwill means you're deceiving someone to give you something more than you deserve, be it respect, appreciation, gratitude.
Well, the entire advertising industry is about positioning a product or a person, I mean, to look good, right? Is it all
what are you
unethical
saying?
to position yourself to look good? I always say, you know, people who are successful or people who are famous, most of them become famous because they intentionally engineered their, you know, they did certain things so that they become famous. You know, you have to like be out there, you have to write, you have to be having the right friends, you have to do all those things intentionally to get famous. That's the way the world works. Very few people get famous.
Politicians really so glad to see you. And just anybody, you know, Joe Public, whatever, all the time.
Well, that's an interesting one. Yeah. How about let's turn it on ourselves, as either in rabbinics or, you know, when we meet someone that might, you know, become a congregant, they might like our teaching or whatever. We might catch ourselves being promoting oneself, I guess. You know, be very friendly and welcoming with an agenda.
But I think Sharon is right. You know, a lot of it has to do with your intention. Do you have positive intention or a malicious intention? I mean, to want to present your congregation in a good light because you think somebody would really benefit from that. You know, I think your intention is important. And that's just what's inside of you, you know.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking also there's a classic example of information that maybe somebody asks for a favorite recipe and you leave out a key ingredient, you know, because you don't want anybody, you know, with your recipe. That's that would the rabbis would consider stealing, or giving them intentionally wrong information that you knowledge that you have. Well,
you know, Sharon, be careful. My understanding, it's actually, when I looked into research this, I found it fascinating. My understanding of the difference between deception, which could be a lie, could be sheker, and the deception, which is theft, is whether or not you're receiving something from the person. Are you taking something from the person? So when you give your neighbor the recipe and you leave out the key ingredient, you're not getting anything from them. You're just deceiving them. Now, that's wrong. That's telling a lie. That's deceiving. That's being nasty. But I'm not sure it's stealing. Stealing is when they would, you know, when, let's say you give them a recipe and you credit yourself with the recipe and not your other neighbor, you know, who gave it to you, then you're stealing, because then they're going to have it. Wow, they're going to appreciate you. They're going to give you more respect, or think of you as a greater friend or cook or whatever, that you've done something which you didn't really do. So I think it's important to always look for that. What are you taking?
Possibly as well, you know, claiming that, you know, like plagiarism, claiming that you wrote something that somebody else wrote.
Yep.
Certainly in the dot.
Yeah, cheating on a test.
Mm-hmm.
Cheating on a test is definitely this, because the teacher or the organization are going to credit you with knowledge you don't have. Okay, the Talmud comments that most people steal. What types of things do most people steal? Why do they steal these things? We'll have individual Zoom rooms now for confession.
I steal images off the internet all the time because I work for a nonprofit and I'm doing it for just all the right reasons.
So why do you think those are not worth money?
They're not worth what?
Worth money. Why would you you wouldn't go into a art gallery and steal a picture, right?
Oh, without a doubt. I feel guilty about it. I mean, I do, but I'm emailing something to 9 people, and I'm thinking, but you're right. I have no excuse. I'm a thief.
We all do it. I think the question over here is why. You know, why are we?
Well, I think people who put things on the internet, there's a public nature to that I think is different than if you go into a gallery and you take a picture, or you even take a picture of a picture and use that.
Yeah. I would think that some people, they're not putting it on Etsy or this or that. You can find anything on images, even if it was not intended for public display, but intended rather for a particular website for which you got paid or whatever. I think the reason that I do it, or so many people do it rather easily, is it's a nameless face, or it's a faceless name, or whatever. I have no idea who made these.
Oh, interesting. There's no connection to it. It doesn't look like someone owns this.
Right.
It's there.
Right.
It's the internet. It's there.
Even the most gorgeous artwork, I think, I don't really know this person. Hopefully they'll get paid somewhere else.
Yeah, and it could be what Audrey's saying is we don't really think they expect to be paid. They know that so much of this, so does that entitle us? That does it become a circle? If they know that it's going to be stolen, what are they really doing? Are they expecting to be paid?
Well, I think the same thing happens with music. When there's music on the internet and you write down the words and you sing it without attributing the composer or the poet or what have you. And if you purchased the music, they would get some payment. But by just using it without payment, it's theft.
Okay, let's go on to kidnapping. The main intent of the diber is not to kidnap. At first glance, why is kidnapping theft? If the definition of theft is taking something from another, what is being stolen? When someone is kidnapped, they themselves are taken. Nothing seemingly is being taken from them. However, when someone is kidnapped, their most basic right to control their body is being taken away from them. This includes the ability to move around freely and to be secure from assault, be it violent or sexual. So in the text, and Yehuda said to his brothers, "What do we gain by killing our brother and covering up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, but let us not do away with him ourselves. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh." His brothers agreed. When Midianite traders passed by, they pulled Joseph up out of the pit. They sold Joseph for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites who brought Joseph to Egypt. Conversation. Both murder and kidnapping are punishable by death. What do you think Yehuda was thinking by exchanging one sin for the other?
I think it's responsibility for the act, knowing very well that the life of a slave is not a particularly kind one. You can see that it's probably akin to murder. But he didn't want the responsibility for the actual murder.
Why?
He didn't want Joseph's blood on his hands.
The question is, why would kidnapping be less? In terms of sins or crimes, it's an equal crime, actually. It's punished, they're both capital offenses.
Why would they be the same? Taking a life is the worst, isn't it? More than...
Yeah, okay, you could argue that. I'm not sure we know that. We find, at least in the Torah halakha, that they're both capital offenses. You're going to get the same punishment for them.
Uh-huh. that doesn't mean they're the same.
Not necessarily. So
Well,
you would say that,
Yeah,
of course, murderers were.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, they're both, they're both a sin, but if someone's kidnapped or sold into slavery, he's not dead and still has a life. Someone kills you, that's it. You can't get around from that. But
There's no way back.
yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, if someone wants to ransom, the kidnapping, if you think about it, I don't know if it's kidnapping is the same as like what it is today, where someone will kidnap you and then say, to their loved ones, give me $1 million. Maybe, in biblical times it was you get kidnapped and you get sold into slavery, like, or our whole slavery industry, that was kidnapping. But, there's a potential of getting out of it and not being dead. But
Right.
now,
Yeah.
But it's so severe, I think the punishment is because what's the price for your own freedom and your own autonomy? When you get kidnapped and sold into slavery, you don't have freedom that someone stole of someone.
This says a lot about that. Okay, great.
Yeah.
According to this understanding, sexual abuse is theft. Right? A person has a right to their own body, and you are the offender is using it in a way that it's not to the agreement. They don't have the right to use it this way. How does framing it in this way inform the conversation?
I think that it's very contemporary right now with all of the changes in, business conduct and reframing it as a real, as a real violation. I mean, it's not just seen as business as usual anymore.
Does it help that it's considered theft?
I think so. I think it makes it.
I think it's also, there's things in the Torah that aren't explicit. There is rape is mentioned and whatnot, but if you want to extrapolate and the reason behind it is theft, any kind of thing like this can be, you can look at it as that anything that's done without your permission should be considered theft, because that's basically like one of the things that we learned before is like if you borrow something without someone's permission, it's considered theft. But so if any of these acts and it's done without your permission, I think it's an interesting way to look at it, that it really is theft, and that whole feeling of even when we robbed, we felt violated. It's the same concept. So it's a very good way of looking at it.
The question you put out earlier about is the perpetrator receiving something, and I guess you could say yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, it relates to a question of what does the victim need to reclaim, and it's not just the act, that one act, but they need to reclaim the sense of security. They need to reclaim all of those things that were stolen. So it adds to that conversation and the definition of what actually took place.
Love that. Okay, I'm actually going to skip the next questions because I want to get to the next section. I'll read them, but I don't want to discuss them. Sometimes the victims of sex trafficking and other atrocities are blamed. Where do you think the responsibility lies in crimes of this nature? To what extent do we imprison ourselves? Are people in jail awaiting trial who cannot make bail kidnapped? Interesting questions. Okay, that was all the literal understanding. Let's try to get to the underlying principle here. Underlying the diber, do not steal, is the God-given ability or right to possess. We are in possession of our bodies from the day we are born, and in possession of goodwill from the moment we can express it. We are able to acquire property from the time we can hold onto it, and we are able to create and own our own creations from our first creative moment. The Rakanti writes that the right to freedom derives from the fact that humanity is made in the divine image, and as such is meant to freely exercise their will, as does the Almighty. Do not steal teaches us to recognize the inherent dignity of all people and respect for the right to possess that it affords them. So really, I think this explains that sense of personal violation, is that being human and being in the divine image gives me the right to possess. And when someone violates that right, they're not just taking my property, they actually are demeaning who I am. Because if you respect it and recognize and respect it, that I have this right to possess, and that's part of my dignity, well, you wouldn't then take my thing. Taking my possessions is a denial of my dignity. And that's where this, as Jill just said, what needs to be reclaimed sometimes, what needs to be repaired is actually personal dignity. Let's see over here, the sources. Rabbi Yochanan said, anyone who steals from his friend, even a coin of the smallest value, it is as if he has taken away his life. Like it says, so are the ways of the thief. The soul of its owner he takes. What amazes me is that this is in the Talmud. This is like such a modern thought, and so unbelievable that it's there. Source 2, Pirkei Avot. Rabbi Yossi says, be as careful with other people's property as we are with our own. And source 3, Viktor Frankl. Everything can be taken away from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Okay, so is dismissing someone stealing their dignity?
Can someone steal your dignity without you allowing them to? Did you give them that? In other words, like, I can't make you feel this way. You choose to feel this way. So what if you do something and I say, I don't give a darn. I don't respect this. You didn't steal anything from me. Did you steal something from me if I don't consider that you stole it from me? Does the victim define that?
So I think there is, they actually very well to this Viktor Frankl quote, right? He's almost saying from the point of view of the victim, that the victim always has something left that cannot be taken from him or her, and that is to choose their attitude. Right? Mm-hmm. Unless the victim's killed, I guess, but that's murder. We're talking about theft over here. I would say, to answer your question, that if you make your own physical property ownerless, hefker it's called. If you leave your mattress on the sidewalk, hoping that someone will pick it up, it's because you've relinquished ownership of it. Mm-hmm. So if it doesn't mean anything to you, if it has no value to you at all, and you're happy for others to take it, I don't think that's there.
Okay, what about abstraction? What about embarrassment? What about
right? Well, that's
where the person
right.
chooses not to be embarrassed. He didn't care. Was that theft?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's a borrowed term over here because once again, theft is always getting something, mm-hmm. right? I'm getting something from this other person. Yeah, interesting. Any other comments?
So Joe, what you're saying is that even if everyone else would agree that something is an embarrassment to somebody else, but if they didn't feel embarrassed, then you would question whether or not it truly is an embarrassment, even if everybody else around them thought that this is an embarrassing thing. If they didn't feel embarrassed, then it's not an embarrassing thing.
Yes, and the same for physical things. If, for instance, someone took the coin, and even if it was worth less than blah, 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 and I say, I don't care. It was a penny. I don't care. You didn't take my soul. You didn't take anything that was worth anything to me at all.
But what about if somebody defames you or says something bad, or in the press, let's just say, and maybe with all the different talk about the technology thing, with all the different things going on, you can either be bothered by it or not, or you can ignore it, but still it's there. So I still don't think it should be allowed, just because somebody might say, you can still choose how to feel about it. You can get yourself consumed in it and get upset every time you see somebody tweet something about you or stalking you or whatever it is. But it's still there. So I still think that you may be okay about it, but other people's opinions of you can change based on what's out there. Does that, so I think it would still be a theft, considered a theft. If you're going to defame somebody or say something bad about somebody that's not true, you're stealing their, you can steal their dignity. Even if I could walk around and say, I don't care, I don't think you're important, so I'm not going to get upset about it. But if then 14 other people see it, and then down the road something, you don't get a job because someone else says, "Ooh," even if it's not true.
Which really relates to last week in Lashon Hara. You might have stolen their reputation,
Right.
their name.
Right.
One might be how we cope with it. The other is what it actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, to me, I'm not sure that theft is the right phrase. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm stuck. That theft is always, gaining something. You can destroy something, but maybe destroying is theft. I've taken it away from, even if I didn't gain it, I took it away from you.
That's the worst kind of theft, actually. Like, it's like theft, what do they call it? Bitool, like for no good reason.
Right. I didn't gain. You lost and I didn't gain.
Mm-hmm. At least you gain. Like, sometimes I feel that way. Like, if I lost something or somebody took something, I say, well, I hope they really like that umbrella. I hope they actually use it because it's a really good umbrella, But if you just destroy it for just the sake of destruction, that is even worse.
Right. I think I remember from my yeshiva days that when we learned about damages, there is a source that it's contained. It's a category of theft. Okay. Can you steal someone's sense of dignity, happiness, or self-worth? It's very related. Does the emphasis on preserving human dignity in relationship to the things we own in fact cause materialism or self-centeredness? If we're going to be so lofty about this and say, well, if you take someone's thing, well, you're denying their dignity. That's what it means to be human, to be able to possess.
I'm sorry, I have to leave for a meeting. Thank you
Okay.
all. See you.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Audrey. Any comments on that?
I don't know if I can leave.
I can leave you.
Okay, thank you. Leave me. Let's see. I got it.
Okay.
Well, is that saying, does the emphasis on defining ourselves in terms of our things we own, does defining ourselves and is making our dignity dependent upon the things we own lead to self-centeredness and materialism? I would say absolutely, if I'm understanding the question correctly.
Yeah, I'm not sure about your assumption though. I don't know if that's a self-definition. Where does it start? It starts with the fact that you're human and you're special. You've got this divine image. That entitles you to this right to possess. Now that that's there, that's true, if I would steal something from you besides the physical or whatever that I've stolen, I've violated your dignity, because that's a right that you have. So viewing it that way, would it lead to materialism or self-centeredness? I don't think so. I think it's a really beautiful way of looking at it that elevates it. I think materialism and self-centeredness are lowly. And this gives it a spiritual quality where, maybe that, I think there's a question, you know, how does this change our thinking about, oh, that's really the next section about appreciation, is that it's a privilege to possess things. However, I'll read it. However, having the right to possess means not only that we can own and control things, but also that we should use them for good. Now, does it change viewing possession in this way? Does it change our relationship to possession? Okay, let's go through this because we've got to finish up. The Talmud says, Rabbi Levi raised a contradiction. It is written, the earth and all it contains is the Lord's. And it is written elsewhere, the heavens are the Lord's and the earth he gave to mankind. This is not difficult. Here, the verse that says that the earth is the Lord's refers to the situation before a blessing is recited. And here, where it says, and he gave the earth to mankind, refers to after a blessing is recited. So, how does our text relate to our views on our own possessions and our attitudes towards theft?
I think this was looked at as if you eat something without saying a blessing, that you're stealing from God. So that we need to appreciate that really, you know, we do have to thank God. So if we don't, we're stealing because we're not giving our appreciation for it.
Yeah, we haven't paid. You know, that would be the appreciation. And I think
perhaps not only our appreciation, but our commitment to use what we've just blessed and thanked for good. That's our part of the covenant. That's the other part of the payment.
And not just taking things for granted either, basically.
Right. All of the above. Fantastic. Okay, integration. You know, maybe just before that, I like to read everything. Let's just go back to the conversation at the top of the page because I missed 2 questions. It is this core value that tells us to respect people's bodily rights and personal space. Sexual abuse, in addition to the physical pain, is so bad because it's a violation of human dignity. It reduces a person to a subhuman status. What attitudes in society have precipitated the Me Too movement at this time? And what motivates a person in various kinds of theft? Reflect upon the use of power underlying our discussion. How is dignity related to a sense of power? Okay, interesting question. I'm going to just skip to the bottom here. Integration. What does this diber mean to you as a core value? When can it be applied? What are the challenges you will face? How can you overcome them?
I think that respect of other people's possessions is, you know, the core thing for me. Just knowing that even a simple thing can be a theft. So just to be more careful and pay attention to how other people might feel and whatnot. So, yeah.
Anyone else want to comment? Maybe how is this learning help to understand do not steal?
I think it expands my awareness of what can be considered a theft. And it also enhances my appreciation of our relatedness, that what I do, what I say affects other people. And will that be a net positive or net negative, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's recognizing the interactions we have, whether it's a win-win or a win-lose when it comes to gaining something.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I love that way of looking at it. Okay. When can it be applied? What are the challenges we face and how can we overcome them? I'll let you think about those. We have every day. Observe those around you. How do they treat each other? How often do you notice people infringing on each other's property or rights? And maybe the place to start is with oneself. Take special care of someone else's property or others' rights. Make a concerted effort to. Okay, we've got some supplemental materials which are on the web and some additional information over here. This I found quite shocking, by the way. The National Association of Shoplifting Prevention. How much of it, what do you think happened? According to the NASP, more than 13 billion worth of goods are stolen from retailers every year. That's a lot of stuff.
Well, and isn't it, I don't know if it's, my sister was just saying that unless the value of the item is worth a certain amount in, I'm going to say California, but I could be lying, they won't even prosecute. It's not worth their time.
Yeah.
So, it's like get out of jail free.
Yeah, I think I was studying some Midrash for last week's Torah portion, and the rabbis were comparing Gezel to Hamas, and they were saying, Hamas was basically, even though it was violence, but the just stealing was, it's like if a whole bunch of people steal one little piece of something because they don't think that anyone's going to notice. If you multiply that out, it's a lot. And that's where they didn't even care, because they thought it's not gonna matter. And that's when it was like things are really corrupt because people are doing it all the time because it really doesn't matter and who cares? It's too small. So so yeah, that's what happens. It's not worth it to prosecute, but
Right.
But is that akin to like the broken window theory, where you let small stuff go and it starts snowballing into bigger things? It's societally.
Yeah.
Tragedy.
It's like Ken started off with Netflix, okay, my brother's got an account, I'll use his, password. And then before you know it, Netflix is broke. Too many $15 have been stolen from them.
Actually, I think some of the online says they sort of think it's okay. They don't want 42, but you can. They know more people are watching, but yeah.
I also think that there's been such distrust of large businesses inbred in us in the last decade or so that you kind of think they're going to be just fine. It's
right. And they're doing it to me. So, whatever I can get from them, I'll take.
Right.
Yeah, it's yeah, I guess this relates to what the Talmud says when we, die and go to the pearly gates. One of the first questions we asked are, did you deal honestly in business? Were your transactions honest? And to be clean, have this as a core value, I think is, it's important that we know this is what it means to be Jewish. Maybe a lot more than what we otherwise think. Great. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For spending the time, and we'll see you next week. I'm actually going to be in London, but I will be running it from London. So looking forward to seeing you there.
Safe travels.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Stop recording.